Each and every one of us. We all have these two people living inside of us. The first person that lives inside each and every one of us is called the ego. And this ego is really nothing you're going to ever get rid of through an egoectomy, all right? And you're not going to find it on any of your x-ray machines. This ego is just an idea. And it's an idea that we all have of who we are. And it's an idea that we've come to believe that who we are. And this idea says that who I am is what I have and what I do and what other people think of me. What I have, that is all of my stuff and how much it's worth and how it compares to everybody else's. What I do, that is what I accomplish, what I've achieved, and my reputation, what other people think of me. This is the ego. And the ego's basic idea is that who I am is separate from everybody else. That's what makes me who I am. I'm separate. And I am separate from not only everybody else, but I'm separate from God, and I'm separate from all that I would like to attract into my life. And there's a pie that's out there. And this pie has so many pieces to it. And if I don't get my piece of the pie, somebody else is going to get it for me. So I'm in competition with everybody that's out there. And it's a very competitive, dog eat dog, I've got to get someplace, I've got to be better than, I've got to be number one kind of mentality. This is ego consciousness. Point A. And it's interesting, one of the more intriguing things that I learned when reading Carl Jung, he said that as adults, we reach adulthood, and we think that once you reach adulthood that we're through with our development. But he said we go through these developmental stages, these developmental patterns, and when we reach adulthood, we continue to develop. Some do. And he said that there are archetypes, if you will. And he called these archetypes, he said the lowest archetype that we have as adults is called the archetype of the athlete. And this is the time in our adult life when our primary emphasis is on what we can do, on our body. How beautiful it is, how good it looks, how much hair it has. I used to actually use Brill cream and things, That's gone. Those days are gone. And I used to think that who I was what I looked like. And then he said, if you get past the archetype of the athlete, you move into what he called the archetype of the warrior. And this is the stage where most people find themselves and where almost all disease takes place. The warrior is the time in our adult life when we take our physical bodies out into the world to do what warriors do. And what do warriors do? They compete, they fight, they conquer, they collect as much as they can. This is what we are as warriors. This is the time in our adult life when we set goals. This is the time in our adult life when we are looking at our own quotas. What's in it for me? How much can I get? Who can I defeat? Who I'm better than? You see them on television all the time. We're number one. No, we're number one. And this kind of warrior mentality. And he said most people, particularly in the Western world, get stuck at this level of development. But he said there's a third and a fourth archetype. The third archetype is called the archetype of the statesman or the stateswoman. And this is the time finally in our adult life when we stop saying, what are my quotas and what's in it for me and what can I get? And we begin to say instead, what are your quotas? And how may I serve becomes much more of an important criteria than what am I going to get? And feeling connected to each other and to God and to what we would like to attract into our life, feeling connected to it rather than separate from it is the shift. There's a wonderful story when I was in Phoenix, and I was on radio station KTAR there in the morning with Pat McMahon, and he was so excited and anticipating that Mother Teresa was coming to visit the studio, and she was going to be on the radio. And he's an Irish Catholic, and to have Mother Teresa in the same studio, it was just the highest point of his life. He was so excited. And when she came in, the night before, she had been sleeping at the homeless shelter that had been just dedicated there. And I don't know if you know this about Mother Teresa, but whenever she was away from her mission in Calcutta, she didn't eat. If she was away for 10 days, she didn't eat. She only drank water. And they would bring food to her wherever she was, if she was in Africa, or if she was in Albania, or if she was in Asia, and she would say, no, I just drink water when I'm away from the mission. And they said, but Mother Teresa, you're in your 80s. You can't just not eat for 10 days. Why would you do that? She said, because I have to know inside what the people that I serve are going through themselves. And this is the only way I know how to do it. I have to be able to experience it. And when she walked into the room, all of us knew that we were in the presence of a higher level of awareness. She was one of the people that selected me shortly after she died. In fact, the day that she died, I was speaking in Sydney, Australia, and someone came up and handed me a note just before I went on. It was 9 o'clock in the morning down there, but it was in the evening on the other side of the date line. And I said, isn't that just like her? It was the day of Princess Diana's funeral. She tried to sneak out when no one was noticing. The whole world's attention was focused over here, and that's when she died. This selfless, egoless woman. And when she walked into the room, all of us knew that we were in the presence of that kundalini that I spoke about earlier, that feeling of the shower inside of you, was in all of us. She's about 4'10", maybe weighed 80 pounds, if that. And Pat said to her, he said, Mother Teresa, is there anything that I can do for you? And this is someone who lived at the stateswoman consciousness or higher. And she said, no, Pat. She said, I'm just here to talk about the homeless shelter. And he said, Mother Teresa, he said, we have a very powerful radio station here, 50,000 watts. He said, we could generate an enormous amount of publicity for your mission in Calcutta and what you are doing. And she said, you know, I'm really not here for publicity. It doesn't interest me, but thank you. I just wanted to tell the people of Phoenix about your wonderful shelter where I slept last night and how it can help people who don't have a home. And he said, but Mother Teresa, he said, and he did what the ego always goes to, he said, we could raise a lot of money here today. And she said, I'm really not interested in money or even talking about it, but thank you very much. I just want to talk about the homeless shelter. Finally, Pat got down on his knees, and he almost begged her. He said, Mother Teresa, please, isn't there anything that I can do? And she said, there is one thing that you can do. You seem so serious, she said. She said, tomorrow morning, get up at 4 a.m. and go out onto the streets of Phoenix and find someone who's living there who believes that he's alone and convince him that he's not. That's what you can do. And I wept. And it's hard for me not to, even as I tell this story again and again, that the awareness that we're not alone, the awareness that we're connected, is an awareness that personifies the statesman or the stateswoman phase of your life. And I would suggest to you, those of you who are in practice, if you can get your egos out of your practice and really in your own hearts come from that place where you can teach people that they're not alone, and that healing is not something that is done by someone outside of them, but that healing is something that takes place when you connect to your source, when you reconnect to your source. When people ask me what my view of God is, I always say I always see God as the ocean, and I see myself as a glass. And if I take this glass and I dip it into the ocean, I say, what do I have here? What I have here is a glass of God. It's not as big, and it's not as strong, but it's still God. And just like a wave on the ocean is what the ocean is doing, we are all what God is doing. And if you take one drop of that water and you put it right here, and you say to that drop of water, separate from its source now, I'd like you to create and sustain life. And you watch, and what happens? It will evaporate, vaporize. It will change form and return to its source. It'll go back to the only place. There's only one source. There's only one water on the planet. And there are just all separate glasses and hoses and pitchers full of it, but there's one source. And so it returns in a different form, which is exactly what's happening in your life, by the way. You are changing form, and you'll return to your source. But while this drop of water is separate from its source, it loses the power of its source. It cannot create and sustain life because it is separate from its source. It's only when it reconnects that it regains that power. This drop of water right here, separate from its source, represents your ego. This is the part of you that has come to believe that you are separate. And as long as you believe that you are separate from your source and from each other and from that which you would like to attract into your life, you will always lose the power of your source. And what is the power of the source? The power to heal. The most intriguing thing that I think I learned about healing was from Joel Goldsmith's The Foundations of Mysticism. He said that healing is something that takes place because you bring spirit to the disease process. And he said these words, and this sounds a little strange: disease is an illusion. Disharmony is an illusion. Discord is an illusion. Because if it's not of God, it doesn't exist. And if it's not good, it's not of God. And therefore, that which is not good cannot exist because God creates everything. So the only reason that we believe that it exists is because it is something we create in our minds or through our minds. And when we learn to change our mind about it, it's like it's an error in thinking. And spirit nullifies disease, brings spirit to it. It's like in mathematics, 2 times 2 is 4, has substance. It's always 4. 2 times 2 is 9, has no substance. And you can say it, but the way that you eliminate it is by correcting it. The minute that you correct the error, it disappears. It's gone. And it's in the correction of the error, and that's why one of the most important prayers, and the one that I wrote an essay about in here, is from St. Francis. You know, I never understood this prayer until I read the Foundations of Mysticism about healing. And this is probably the most widely used prayer in the world. He says, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. That is, bring love to hatred and hatred disappears. That's healing. Where there is injury, pardon. Bring that to injury and injury disappears. Where there is doubt, faith or knowing. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. In other words, you correct the error of the illusion of disharmony, discord, and disease by bringing spirit to it.